So I'm going to talk about both the Confederate flag, what we know as the Confederate flag, and the flag of the Confederacy, being the Confederate States of America. They're not the same, but they have an interwoven history, and the latter played a big role in the development and prominent role of the former to where we are today. For ease of conversation, I'm going to refer to the Confederate battle flag as the rebel flag. The taboo flag we're talking about is going to be the rebel flag. And when I say the flag of the Confederacy, that's going to be the flag of the Confederate States of America. So if you're asking yourself, what is the flag of the Confederacy? It's basically a horizontal triband of red, white, and red with a blue canton and a circle of, at the time it was created, 7 stars representing one of these, or each of the 7 states that were the first to secede from the Union. As more states seceded, they added more and more stars until ultimately they had 13 stars in a circle. So basically it would be if Austria and the Betsy Ross flag had a love child, that's what the flag of the Confederacy would look like. The states that originally seceded, you can see 4 of them behind me, the flags of those states, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, what I jokingly call the Islamic Republic of South Carolina, because it's got a crescent moon on it just to piss off the Islamophobes in that state. The other 3 states being Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas. I didn't want to fly Louisiana because the Pelicans just creeps me out. Alabama's flag is plain, so I went with Florida instead. Regarding the flag of the Confederacy, it actually became a liability on the battlefield. When it was originally designed, they wanted to have it look sort of like the American flag because they were breaking off from America, but they wanted to keep some of those aesthetics. The problem was when you're seeing it from a distance, or perhaps more importantly, when you're seeing it hang limp on a pole because there's no wind, and limp is never a good thing, you can't necessarily differentiate between the American flag and the flag of the Confederacy. And for the first Battle of Bull Run, the Confederate soldiers could not distinguish between the two, and they were firing upon each other. So a lot of the Confederate leadership said, okay, this is going to be a problem. We need to have something else. So they adopted what was known at the time as the Confederate battle flag as a distinction. I'm going to call it the rebel flag from now on. So the rebel flag is basically, it's a red banner. It's got a blue saltire with white fimbriation, and there are a total of 13 stars in the blue saltire. Even when it is hanging limp, it is still very distinguishable from the American flag. So that was the whole purpose behind it. It was designed in 1861 by a gentleman named William Porcher Miles, who actually proposed it as the flag for the Confederate States of America, but the powers that be that were making that decision wanted to have a flag that looked more like the American flag, so they went with the earlier flag that I described. As time went on, people in the Confederacy did not care for the flag that they had adopted because it looked too much like the oppressive American flag that represented what they were trying to break away from. So they said, aha, we've got this rebel flag over here. Why not create a new flag that has that in it? So they, in their infinite wisdom, took a plain white flag, stuck the rebel flag on the fly or the hoist side of the flag, and called it a day. Unfortunately, it looks very much like the flag of surrender, especially when it's hanging limp. So the super geniuses realized, okay, this was a mistake. Let's fix it. So their idea to fix it was to put a red stripe down the fly side of the flag, which looked just as ugly, but at least it wasn't completely white. The flag of the Confederacy went through 3 different stages, the latter two having adopted the rebel flag. The rebel flag was first used in battle, flown by the Army of Northern Virginia, most famously under the command of Robert E. Lee. The state of Mississippi incorporated the rebel flag into their state flag in 1894 in advance of a Supreme Court decision that they believed was going to be in their favor regarding the legalization of segregation, meaning that Black people and white people had to be separate in every respect, not just in schools, in all social life, you name it. And sure enough, 2 years later, that actually happened. And Mississippi kept that rebel flag as part of their flag design until 2021, when they adopted the Magnolia monstrosity that you see over here. It's actually not a bad flag. I just like calling it that. And it's certainly better than what they had. When the rebel flag really took off was in 1948, when an incredibly racist politician from South Carolina named Strom Thurmond ran for the presidency. He had been a Democrat, but I guess the Democratic Party wasn't racist enough for him, so he broke off, helped form what became known as the Dixiecrats, It's a political party that was a racist offshoot of the Democratic Party. Their fourth article of incorporation said, we quote, we stand for segregation of the races. So he was running on that platform. Not just his campaign, but that party itself adopted many symbols of the Confederacy, particularly the rebel flag. So that is when, the subjugation of Black people truly became interwoven with the rebel flag in the 20th century, is when it was adopted by the Dixiecrats, and it's never, gotten away from that. In 1954, when the Supreme Court did an about face on segregation and ruled that it was unconstitutional, Georgia kind of followed in Mississippi's footsteps and said, fuck you, and adopted a new state flag that had the rebel flag incorporated into it until I believe it was 2003, under pressure from everybody who was not a racist asshole. Georgia finally had a referendum to change their flag to what you see behind me. Unfortunately, Georgia kind of got another to the general public in without most people realizing it, because what they did was adopt the flag of the Confederate States of America. They just put their seal right in the middle of the circle of 13 stars. So it is still a symbol of the Confederacy. It's just not the one that was most prominently used in the context of white supremacy and hate, at least in the 20th century. When I say it was everywhere at the time in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, it really was everywhere. And it was something that we all grew up being very desensitized to, because you saw it in shirts, in hats, in shoes, in jewelry, patches that people would wear on their jackets. We had a popular TV show called The Dukes of Hazzard, which was set, I believe, in Georgia, which the two main characters had a car called the General Lee, a bright orange car that had a Confederate flag, detail on the roof of the car. Most people that, we grew up hearing that this was just a symbol of the South. It was Southern pride. It was nothing to do with anything else. And if you're a white person growing up in the South at that time, it makes sense because you don't know the history. It's a completely different history for anybody who is Black growing up in the South. But when you get older and you dig into the history of the flag, and you realize how it has been used by political parties, by the Ku Klux Klan, by other hate groups, to instill fear and intimidation and terror in Black Americans, you realize just how insidious this flag actually is, and how we had been conditioned growing up to just accept this as a flag of, this is just Southern pride.